The Galactic Academy of Higher Learning didn't just sit at the center of the Orion Arm, it practically owned the real estate. A sprawling complex of crystalline domes and gravity-defying architecture that would make Earth's most ambitious engineers weep into their primitive concrete. The Academy had been the intellectual nexus of 7 major sentient species for the past 3 millennia, which made the current situation all the more absurd. And this is our newest participant in the Interspecies Cultural Exchange Initiative, announced Dean Vorlex, his 3 throat sacs inflating with what passed for pride among the Tzi'il. His appendages gestured toward what could only be described as an underwhelming biological specimen, a representative of the recently discovered species from the backwater system Sol 3. The human stood there, attempting not to fidget under the scrutinizing gaze of 17 different types of optical organs. The Academy's Grand Hall, designed to intimidate even the most confident of galactic citizens, was doing its job spectacularly. "Fascinating," whispered a Drelneth student, their crystalline exoskeleton refracting light in a display of skepticism. "It doesn't even have a proper exoskeleton. How does it keep its organs from simply falling out? I heard they only discovered faster-than-light travel less than a century ago," another voice chittered from somewhere in the crowd. "They probably still think quantum entanglement is spooky." The Drelneth's companion, a gelatinous Movarian, rippled with what could best be translated as condescending amusement. "Look at the bilateral symmetry. So predictable. Evolution clearly gave up halfway through." The human's face flushed, a peculiar physiological response that fascinated the xenobiology students present. The ability to involuntarily broadcast emotional states through pigmentation changes seemed like a severe evolutionary disadvantage. How had this species not been hunted to extinction? The representative will be joining the Advanced Theoretical Governance course, as well as practical applications of multiphasic engineering, Dean Vorlex continued, either oblivious to or deliberately ignoring the murmurs. "I expect you all to demonstrate the enlightened inclusivity that has made our institution the paragon of galactic education." Translation: Don't make the primitives cry. It looks bad on the brochures. The human was escorted to temporary quarters, a hexagonal chamber clearly designed for beings with entirely different anatomical requirements. The atmospheric regulator hissed, adjusting to accommodate the unusual oxygen-nitrogen mixture this species required. A bit excessive for a creature that had evolved on a single biome planet with embarrassingly stable environmental conditions. "Your personal effects have been decontaminated and will arrive shortly," chirped the orientation droid, its translation matrix struggling with the crude phonetic language. "Your schedule has been uploaded to your neural interface." "Oh!" The droid paused, optical sensors recalibrating as it processed the absence of standard neural implants. "Apologies. How quaint. We'll provide you with a physical datapad. Haven't manufactured one of those in decades." The droid hovered away, leaving the human alone with thoughts that remained mercifully private in a building where most communications occurred via telepathic networks. The Advanced Theoretical Governance Lecture Hall resembled a terrestrial amphitheater, if said amphitheater had been designed by someone with a complete disregard for Euclidean geometry. Gravity plates allowed students from various homeworlds to sit at angles that would liquefy human internal organs. The professor, an ancient Kuvari with skin that rippled like quantum foam, gesticulated with multiple limbs as holographic projections of political systems from across the galaxy materialized and dissolved. The hegemonistic convergence of the Proxima cluster represents an interesting case study in distributed authority. The professor's voice resonated directly into the minds of most students. The human, lacking the proper neural architecture, required an external translator device that lagged by 2.3 seconds, an eternity in academic discourse. Note how their legislative process evolved from ritualistic combat to symbolic algorithm battles, yet retained the ceremonial disembowelment in cases of electoral fraud. The human scribbled notes furiously on an archaic tablet, while others simply tagged the information for later neural download. Several students cast amused glances at the primitive data storage method. Perhaps our Sol 3 colleague would like to enlighten us about governance systems on their homeworld, the professor suddenly suggested, multiple eyes swiveling toward the human. I understand your species has nearly 200 autonomous political divisions. How charmingly inefficient. The human stood, cleared their throat, a bizarre mammalian noise that caused several amphibious students to recoil, and began explaining concepts like democracy and representative republics, systems so ancient that most galactic civilizations had relegated them to historical footnotes millennia ago. Fascinating, the professor interrupted. You're suggesting your leaders are selected based on popularity contests, rather than cognitive optimization or genetic predestination, and you still maintain physical voting locations instead of neural consensus gathering? No wonder your species took so long to achieve spaceflight. Subdued bioluminescent chuckling rippled through the classroom. The cafeteria, or nutritional absorption chamber, as it was officially designated, presented its own unique challenges. Food synthesizers calibrated for hundreds of different biochemistries hummed along the walls, dispensing everything from crystallized noble gases to superheated plasma smoothies. The humans stared helplessly at a terminal displaying options in 17 different scripts, none of them remotely resembling Earth languages. "Try the blue button," came a voice from behind. "It's programmed for carbon-based oxygen breathers." The source of the advice was a Terrellian, a species that resembled nothing so much as an ambulatory fern, with eyes scattered throughout their fronds. "I'm first growth under twin moons, but you can call me Twin Moon, dealing with those archaic vocal cords of yours." "Thanks," the human replied, pressing the indicated button. The synthesizer hummed and produced a bowl of what appeared to be luminescent noodles. "Is this safe?" "Probably." Twin Moon's fronds fluttered in what might have been a shrug. "It's calibrated for Dendari physiology, but they're carbon-based too. Might taste like what you'd call battery acid, but your species has those fascinating liver organs, right? Should filter out the toxins before any permanent damage." The human cautiously sampled the food, finding it tasted surprisingly like overcooked pasta with metallic undertones. "You're causing quite the stir, you know," Twin Moon continued, absorbing nutrients through their roots as they settled into the specially designed soil pit that served as their seat. First SOL3 representative in the Academy's history. Most species wait until they've at least mastered gravitational manipulation before applying. "We're precocious," the human replied with a wry smile. "That's one word for it. Others are using terms like prematurely elevated or charity case. The Galactic Council's decision to fast-track Earth's application has ruffled some appendages." The human's expression shifted. "Fast-tracked? We were told the application process took 50 years. "For most species, yes. Yours took what? 5? "Suspicious, if you ask the political science department. Some think the Council is using humans as pawns in the ongoing tension between the Axis powers and the Concordat." "We're not pawns," the human said with unexpected firmness. "We earned our place here." "Of course you did." Twin Moon's tone was kindly, but their pheromones, undetectable to human olfactory organs, expressed amused disbelief. "Just like the krill earned their academy seats after coincidentally discovering the richest dysonium deposits in the sector." The conversation was interrupted by a commotion across the chamber. A group of arthropodal Vexcar students were engaged in heated debate with Serpentine Slith, their translator unit struggling to keep up with the rapid-fire exchange. "Preposterous to suggest the Concordat would violate the non-interference treaty." "Then explain the Proxima incident. 3 colony worlds destabilized, and your government claims ignorance? Please maintain decorum, requested an observer droid hovering nearby. Political discourse exceeding 75 decibels must be confined to designated debate chambers. The arguing students lowered their volumes, but continued glaring at each other with various specialized organs evolved specifically for expressing hostility. That's been happening more frequently, Twin Moon noted, absorbing nutrients more rapidly, the Tyrellian equivalent of stress eating. The situation between the Axis and Concordat is deteriorating. 3,000 years of Cold War might finally be heating up. Over what? The human asked. The usual. Resources, territory, ideological differences about the fundamental nature of consciousness. Also, the Concordat developed a new faster-than-light communication system that the Axis powers believe violates several treaties. If true, it would shift the balance of power significantly. The human frowned. That sounds serious. It is. The last time galactic powers went to actual war was before the Academy was founded. Nobody alive remembers what real conflict looks like. Twin Moon's fronds stiffened suddenly. Well, except maybe your species. I read that you still engage in physical combat on your homeworld. Is that true? Or just xenanthropological sensationalism? Before the human could answer, a shrill tone echoed through the chamber, signaling the end of the nutrition period. Students began filing out, some using traditional limbs, others levitating, a few simply teleporting to their next locations. Temporal physics next? Twin Moon asked. When the human nodded, the ambulatory plant sighed, a sound like wind through autumn leaves. Don't take it personally when Professor Cronus ignores you. He believes species that perceive time linearly are intellectually limited by definition. As they made their way down corridors that occasionally reconfigured themselves according to some incomprehensible architectural algorithm, the human reflected that being considered primitive might actually be the least of their problems. Not if the political tensions playing out in microcosm around them continued to escalate. After all, humans knew something about war that these advanced civilizations seemed to have forgotten. Peace is always more fragile than anyone wants to believe. 2 standard galactic weeks into the semester, and the human had established something resembling a routine. This was no small feat in an institution where the concept of routine was considered a developmental disability by several faculty members. The multiphasic engineering lab hummed with activity, literally, as several of the experiments generated harmonic vibrations that caused the human's teeth to ache. Their assigned workstation stood conspicuously lower than the others, a clumsy accommodation for a species that hadn't evolved to manipulate gravity at the molecular level. "Attention, students," announced Professor Helix, a towering insectoid whose multifaceted eyes contained more processing power than Earth's most advanced supercomputers. Today, we begin the Integrated Systems Project. You will design and prototype a solution to one of the 12 designated galactic challenges. You have been assigned to cross-species teams to encourage diverse cognitive approaches. The human glanced at their datapad as it pinged with team assignments. Unsurprisingly, they'd been placed with Twin Moon, the Academy's unsubtle attempt at pairing primitives with those willing to tolerate them. Their other teammates included a BizTalk collective, essentially an autonomous swarm of flying creatures that functioned as a single consciousness, and a Murgova, a silicon-based life form whose body consisted of an ever-shifting crystalline structure that refracted light in psychedelic patterns. Your team has been assigned Challenge 6, Professor Helix continued, compound eyes glittering. Create a portable device capable of neutralizing quantum decay in unstable isotopes without violating the Pauli exclusion principle. The human stared blankly, wondering if there had been a translation error. Sounds like a straightforward assignment, hummed the BizTalk collective, the sound emanating from the synchronized vibration of thousands of tiny wings. though they're clearly patronizing us with such a basic challenge. Basic, the human muttered, feeling a familiar sinking sensation in the pit of their stomach. Yes, resonated the Murgva, their crystalline form pulsating with mild annoyance. Last semester's challenge involved manipulating the fabric of space-time while respecting conservation of energy. That was actually stimulating. Twin Moon noticed the human's distress and leaned closer, leaves rustling sympathetically. Don't worry. Just think of it as, like building a better toaster, except the bread is reality itself, and the heat is the fundamental force binding subatomic particles. That doesn't help at all, the human whispered. Just offer whatever insights you can, Twin Moon suggested. These projects are designed to leverage diverse perspectives. The Murugva vibrated in what might have been a chuckle. Yes, speaking of which, does your species understand the concept of quantum superposition yet? Or do you still believe particles have to be in just one place at a time? As the teams dispersed to their project spaces, the Academy's news feeds flickered with updates. The human had learned to watch these carefully. They were often the only window into galactic politics that didn't require neural implants or telepathic receptors to access. Breaking. Concordat diplomats walk out of treaty negotiations on Proxima Station. Axis powers deploy defense grid around disputed nebula. The feed quickly switched to a panel of experts, a floating gas being, something resembling an evolved cephalopod, and what appeared to be a sentient quantum algorithm represented by a shifting mandala of light. This represents a critical escalation, stated the gas being, pulsing with concern. The Concordat rarely engages in such overt displays of diplomatic aggression. Perhaps, countered the cephalopod, but the Axis powers' decision to activate their defense grid violates at least 3 provisions of the non-militarization agreement of 15783. The quantum algorithm rippled disapprovingly. Your chronology is flawed. The grid activation preceded the diplomatic walkout by 3.7 microcycles. That's impossible, began the cephalopod. The feed cut abruptly to a faculty announcement about proper disposal of radioactive waste and telepathic hygiene in communal spaces. Across the lab, students had formed small clusters, conversation humming at frequencies both audible and beyond human perception. The Vex car contingent had congregated at one end, their exoskeletons clicking irritably as they gesticulated toward a group of Slith students. Your government is deliberately provoking conflict, hissed one Vex car, mandibles twitching. The deployment of tachyon detection arrays in neutral space is a clear act of aggression, as if your precious Concordat hasn't been violating temporal surveillance treaties for decades. A Slith shot back, neural plumes flaring. Everyone knows you've been mapping future probability branches to gain tactical advantages. Preposterous! The Concordat would never— Please return to your assigned projects, interrupted Professor Helix, looming suddenly between the groups. Political discourse is reserved for designated forums and appropriate courses. Their compound eyes swiveled meaningfully. Need I remind you of the penalties for disrupting academic functions? The students dispersed, but the tension lingered like ozone after a lightning strike. It's getting worse, Twin Moon observed, joining the human at their workspace. 100 minor grievances accumulated over millennia, all coming to a head because of this faster-than-light communication breakthrough. I don't understand, the human admitted, absently adjusting the parameters on a quantum visualization tool. If the technology exists, won't everyone eventually have it? Why fight over something that can't be contained? The Bziztok collective vibrated thoughtfully nearby, thousands of tiny bodies forming a shifting cloud. An excellent question from such a temporally limited perspective. The technology itself isn't the issue. It's the implications. If the Concordat can transmit information instantaneously across any distance, They could coordinate military actions with perfect timing across multiple fronts. And in warfare, timing is everything, the human murmured. The BZZ-TOC collective paused, component creatures momentarily falling out of formation. That's remarkably insightful for a species that only recently mastered nuclear fission without annihilating themselves. We came close enough to learn the lesson, the human replied grimly. The Mira, who had been interfacing directly with the lab's central computer, suddenly crystallized into a sharp, jagged form, their equivalent of alarm. The Academy has just elevated its security status. External communications are being monitored. Something significant must have occurred. Before anyone could respond, their datapads simultaneously chimed with an administrative notification. Attention all students. Due to the evolving diplomatic situation, the Academy is implementing Security Protocol Delta. All students are required to submit species and government affiliations for security categorization. Interspecies fraternization restrictions will be posted by end of cycle. That's unprecedented. Twin Moon's fronds drooped with concern. The Academy has maintained political neutrality since its founding. Neutrality is a luxury of peaceful times, resonated the Murgva grimly. The human returned to their quarters that evening to find a pair of security drones scanning their meager possessions. The machines, sleek silver orbs hovering silently, merely projected a message when questioned. Standard security procedure. All non-integrated residents subject to enhanced monitoring. In other words, the human muttered after they'd departed, the primitive without built-in surveillance hardware needs to be watched the old-fashioned way. A soft chime indicated a message on their datapad. Project team meeting location changed. Proceed to sublevel 42, section Gamma. Bring all research materials. Strange. They hadn't even begun serious work on the project yet. The journey to sublevel 42 took longer than expected. The Academy's internal transport system had been partially restricted, forcing the human to navigate a labyrinth of corridors and gravity shafts designed for beings with very different locomotion capabilities. Section Gamma proved to be a rarely used storage area, dimly lit and humming with forgotten machinery. Twin Moon was waiting, fronds uncharacteristically still. Good, you came alone, the plant being said softly. The Bztok and Murgva won't be joining us. What's going on? The situation is deteriorating rapidly. The Murgva's crystalline structure contains trace elements that align them with the Concordat. They've been segregated with other silicon-based lifeforms. The Bztok collective has elected to enter stasis until the political climate stabilizes. Segregated? That's insane. We're students, not diplomats or soldiers. You don't understand. Twin Moon's voice dropped lower. Many of us aren't just students. The Academy has always been more than an educational institution. It's a political chessboard. Why do you think Earth's application was fast-tracked? Your species represents something valuable, a wild card, unaligned with existing power structures. The human digested this information slowly. And what about you? Where do Terrellians fall in this conflict? We're traditionally neutral. Plant-based consciousness evolved differently from both carbon and silicon foundations. We've maintained diplomatic ties with both factions. Twin Moon paused. But neutrality is becoming difficult to maintain. A distant alarm blared briefly before cutting off. That's the third perimeter breach warning in 2 hours, Twin Moon said. Someone is testing the Academy's defenses. Testing for what? The Academy contains the greatest collection of scientific knowledge in the galaxy. If conflict breaks out, controlling this institution would be strategically valuable. The human's eyes widened. You think someone would attack the Academy? But it's a school. It's also the most advanced research facility in known space. The weapons development lab alone could turn the tide of any conflict. There's a weapons lab in a school? Of course. We're better to develop new technologies than in an environment dedicated to pushing boundaries. Nearly every major technological breakthrough of the last millennium originated here. Their conversation was interrupted by a building-wide announcement, the voice of Dean Vorlex unnaturally calm. Attention all Academy residents. Due to developing circumstances, we are implementing Lockdown Protocol Omega. All students are to return to their assigned quarters immediately. Security fields will activate in 10 minutes. Any individuals caught in transit corridors will be subjected to neural paralysis. This is happening faster than I expected. Twin Moon's leaves trembled. You need to get back to your quarters. What about our project? I think, Twin Moon said grimly, we're about to get a very different kind of education. The human moved to leave, then turned back. If things get worse, how bad could it get? The last true conflict between galactic powers occurred 12,000 years ago. It rendered 17 solar systems uninhabitable and caused a localized breakdown in the fabric of space-time. Modern weapons are significantly more advanced. That's not comforting. It wasn't meant to be. Twin Moon's eyes glinted from between their fronds. Get to your quarters. And remember, in the coming days, old alliances will matter more than Academy regulations. When species feel threatened, they revert to evolutionary imperatives. And where does that leave humans? In an interesting position. You have no established alliances, no ancient grudges with either faction. You're a variable no one has accounted for. Twin Moon's fronds rustled with what might have been amusement. Perhaps being the primitive newcomer will prove advantageous after all. The human had barely reached their quarters when the security fields activated, shimmering barriers of energy across every doorway and intersection. The datapad pinged with alarming frequency, each notification more restrictive than the last. All classes suspended indefinitely. Nutritional chamber access restricted to designated time slots by species. Unauthorized gatherings of more than 3 students prohibited. All research projects relating to energy manipulation, quantum physics, or temporal mechanics are classified until further notice. Outside, the perpetual twilight of the Academy's artificial atmosphere had darkened, defense systems obscuring the stars. Emergency lights cast an eerie blue glow through the halls, designed to be visible across all known visual spectra. The humans sat on the edge of their assigned sleep platform, feeling more alien than ever. The most advanced academic institution in the galaxy was transforming into a fortress, ancient rivalries resurfacing among beings who claimed to have evolved beyond primitive tribalism. Just as they were contemplating the irony, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then plunged into darkness. Emergency backups failed to engage. In the sudden silence, the human could hear distant shouting, the clatter of exoskeletons, the slither of serpentine bodies. Then a new sound. The distinctive high-pitched whine of energy weapons discharging. The lockdown had failed. War had come to the classroom. And despite being surrounded by the most intelligent beings in the galaxy, the humans suspected that primitive, violent Earth might have been better preparation for what was coming than all the advanced degrees in theoretical physics combined.
It's amazing how quickly a sophisticated academic setting can devolve into primordial chaos. One moment everyone was debating resource allocation theories, the next, well, let's just say that 6 tentacled beings make surprisingly effective fighters when properly motivated. The Centaurian delegation flipped their desks with alarming precision. The Andromedans responded by activating personal shield generators that ironically violated at least 16 Academy regulations. In the corner, 3 Pleiadians transformed their note-taking devices into something decidedly less scholastic and considerably more lethal. "This is completely against protocol," shrieked the professor, whose evolutionary background clearly hadn't prepared them for conflict resolution beyond strongly worded citations. Meanwhile, the human, that peculiar bipedal creature everyone had dismissed as an amusing evolutionary footnote, calmly assessed the situation with remarkable clarity. While advanced species panicked or formed attack squadrons based on millennia-old grudges, the human's supposedly primitive brain was calculating escape routes, defensive positions, and potential improvised weapons. When a stray energy pulse shattered the classroom's ornate crystal chandelier, the human moved with startling efficiency. Without activating a single piece of technology, they slid across the polished floor, yanked a trembling Betelgeusian youngling from harm's way, and used a simple textbook to deflect crystalline shrapnel. "Everyone to the back wall now!" The human's voice cut through the chaos with surprising authority. What happened next defied all evolutionary expectations. Species with 16 generations of diplomatic training and neural implants designed specifically for crisis management found themselves instinctively following orders from the primitive Earthling. Perhaps there was something to be said for evolving on a planet where danger lurked around every corner and survival depended on quick thinking rather than advanced technology. The classroom resembled what historians might call a complete disaster, or what insurance adjusters across the galaxy would term an act of multiple gods. Yet amid the chaos of overturned gravitational stabilizers and smoking databanks, the human, the supposedly underdeveloped primate, orchestrated a masterclass in crisis management. "You, with the auxiliary breathing apparatus, grab that fire suppression unit." The human pointed to a Neptunian who blinked all 7 eyes in confusion before complying. "And you lot with the telescoping limbs, secure that door." Most fascinating was how the human repurposed academic tools into strategic assets. A holographic star chart became an improvised barrier. A quantum probability calculator transformed into a makeshift communication device. Even the professor's prize collection of rare universal constants found new purpose as projectiles against particularly aggressive students. "Has anyone considered," the human said while simultaneously tying a pressure bandage around a wounded Arcturian's appendage, "that this entire conflict stems from a simple translation error in the resource allocation algorithm?" Silence fell across the room. The Galactic Standard Translation Matrix confuses your species' word for deplete with distribute. Your delegation isn't advocating for depleting Sector 7's plasma reserves. You're suggesting redistributing them. The revelation struck the warring factions with the force of a supernova. Centuries of interspecies distrust, unraveled by a being whose ancestors had been painting on cave walls while others were building wormhole generators. "How did you notice?" asked the Andromedan representative, tentacles drooping in embarrassment. "Because I don't rely on translation algorithms," the human explained. "My species still learns languages the old-fashioned way, by making mistakes and looking foolish until we get it right." As the classroom returned to some semblance of order, the human helped the professor recalibrate their gravity stabilizer. "Perhaps," the educator suggested with newfound respect, "we should add basic, non-technological survival skills to the curriculum." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A species that couldn't naturally regenerate limbs, photosynthesize nutrients, or survive in vacuum had just demonstrated evolutionary advantages that no neural enhancement or genetic modification could replicate. Later, as maintenance droids repaired the classroom, the Dean of Interspecies Relations approached the human. "The Galactic Education Council would like to formally request your input on our emergency response protocols." The human grinned, happy to help, though on Earth we just call it Tuesday. Perhaps there was something to be said for evolving on a planet where danger lurked around every corner. It prepared you for the ultimate final exam, survival. And on that test, the primitive human had just set the curve.